On a bitterly cold night, the park was blanketed in snow, its silence broken only by the distant howling wind. But then a sharp bark pierced the stillness. Urgent, desperate. Daniel Whitmore, a seasoned patrol officer, hurried through the park, drawn by the cry. What he found would shake him to his core: a German shepherd dragging a battered cardboard box through the snow. Inside the box was something far more fragile than anyone could have imagined. What could a dog be doing in the snow at this hour, and what was inside the box? Stay with us as we unravel a heart-stopping tale of loyalty, courage, and an unbreakable bond. Watch now. The night was cold, far colder than any winter Daniel Whitmore had experienced in his years as a patrol officer. The park lay beneath a thick blanket of snow, a perfect silence settling over it. The world was muted, only the occasional rustle of the wind breaking the stillness. The streetlights cast pale halos in the air, their glow swallowed by the falling snowflakes. The sound of the storm howling through the streets was distant, almost unreal, as though the world had been frozen in time. Daniel walked along the park's winding path, his boots crunching against the thick snow. His breath formed small clouds in the air, vanishing almost as soon as they appeared. The temperature was biting sharp enough to sting his skin. Yet he didn't feel the cold. His mind was occupied with the usual thoughts that filled his head during these late-night shifts: the emptiness of the park, the haunting quiet of the city, the long hours spent alone with only his thoughts for company. The park, usually a lively place filled with families and children, was now abandoned, buried under a heavy layer of snow. The benches were unrecognizable, their outlines lost beneath the drifts. The swings swayed gently in the wind, but there were no children to laugh and shout from them. The trees, stripped of their leaves, stood like silent sentinels bent under the weight of the snow. The park had always been a place of solitude at night, but tonight it felt different. There was something in the air, something unsettling. Daniel couldn't put his finger on it, but it was there, lingering just beyond the edge of his senses. The stillness was too perfect, too complete. As he moved forward, his eyes scanning the empty benches and trees, a sound cut through the quiet. A bark. It was sharp, urgent, not the playful bark of a pet, but the cry of a dog in distress. Daniel's hand instinctively went to the flashlight at his belt, his pace quickening as he searched the park for the source of the sound. He knew there should be no dogs out here, especially not in these harsh conditions. His eyes darted to the left, and there, emerging from the dark shadows of the park, was a figure. A German shepherd. Its coat, thick and matted with snow, was dragging something across the ground. The dog moved with purpose, its breath visible in the air, its amber eyes glowing faintly in the weak light. It wasn't just walking, it was dragging something, struggling through the snow, its movements determined. Daniel stopped in his tracks, watching as the dog moved closer. His heart skipped a beat as he realized that the dog wasn't dragging a stick or a bag. It was dragging a cardboard box, the edges soft and crumpled from the weight of the snow. The dog's tail was stiff, and its eyes locked onto Daniel with an urgency that sent a shiver down his spine. This was no ordinary night, and this was no ordinary dog. Daniel's instincts kicked in as he approached, his mind racing with questions. Why was this dog dragging a box in the middle of a snowstorm, and what was inside? He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever he was about to find. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest as he moved closer to the German shepherd, still dragging the box through the snow with an almost unnatural determination. The dog's body was taut with effort, its breath visible in the frigid air. The box was no longer just a mysterious object. It was a sign, a signal that something was wrong. This wasn't the behavior of a normal dog. The urgency in its movements couldn't be ignored. As Daniel approached cautiously, the German shepherd stopped, standing stiffly beside the box. It gave a low growl, not in aggression, but as if to warn him to proceed carefully. The dog's amber eyes locked onto his, the gaze unwavering. There was a silent trust between them, a bond that made Daniel feel as though the dog was waiting for him to take the next step. He kneeled slowly beside the box, his hands trembling slightly as he brushed the snow off its edges. The cardboard was damp and soft from the snow, its corners bent from being dragged through the park. He hesitated for a moment, the weight of the situation settling heavily on his shoulders. What could be inside? A flash of doubt ran through him, but his duty as an officer pushed him forward. With a deep breath, Daniel lifted the box flap, peeling it open carefully. Inside, he found something that made his blood run cold. Curled up in the box, surrounded by cold, damp fabric, was a small child. A girl no more than 5 years old, her face pale as snow, her lips tinged blue from the cold. Her limbs were thin, fragile, barely a sign of life left in her tiny body. She lay still, her chest barely rising with the faintest breath. Her dark hair, matted with ice, spilled across her face, and her oversized sweater, now soaked with snow, hung loosely around her frail frame. Daniel's heart clenched as he gently touched her cold cheek, checking for a pulse. The feeling of her tiny, fragile body under his fingers was a stark reminder of how close to death she was. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck, waiting. The pulse was faint, but there the smallest flutter of life that brought a rush of relief to his chest. She was alive. Barely. His mind raced. Who could have left this little girl here? How had she ended up in the park, abandoned in the snow? The only sound was the howl of the wind as Daniel lifted the girl carefully from the box, cradling her gently in his arms. Her tiny body felt impossibly light, as if every ounce of her had been drained by the cold. The German shepherd, still standing guard beside him, let out a low whine as if urging him to act faster. Daniel, determined to save her, turned and began to move quickly toward the nearest exit of the park. His footsteps were heavy, the snow crunching beneath his boots, but his mind was focused on one thing: getting this child to safety. The dog's steady presence at his side offered a strange comfort. It stayed close, its protective instinct unwavering, its watchful eyes never leaving the child in his arms. Daniel felt a deep connection with the dog, as if the animal knew the gravity of the situation and was committed to seeing it through. As he reached the edge of the park, Daniel's mind was already racing with the next steps. The girl needed warmth. She needed medical help immediately. There was no time to waste. With the German shepherd following closely, he picked up the pace, heading toward the nearest medical outpost, praying he wasn't too late. Daniel's grip on the small, fragile body in his arms tightened as he hurried through the park. Her skin was unnervingly cold, and as he looked down at her pale face, a chill ran through him. Not from the winter night, but from the fear that he might lose her if he didn't act fast enough. Her cheeks were hollow, the pale skin stretched tight over her bones, and her lips, a soft shade of blue, barely moved as she breathed. The faintest rise and fall of her chest was the only sign that she was still alive. The girl's hands, once soft and warm like any child's, were now raw and red, frostbitten from the cold. Her small fingers were stiff like fragile twigs, and Daniel could feel the icy bite of the air against her skin. Her clothes, a large, oversized sweater, seemed to offer little protection against the bitter wind. It was as if she had been left to freeze, to be forgotten. Daniel's heart twisted at the thought. Despite the cold, despite the shock of finding her in this state, there was something about her, a faint flutter of life, that made him believe she could still pull through. Her breath was shallow, each exhale barely more than a whisper in the still air. But there was hope, a tiny flicker of it that he refused to ignore. As Daniel continued through the park, his eyes darted down to the German shepherd by his side. The dog was ever watchful, trotting alongside him with purposeful strides, its amber eyes focused on the girl in his arms. The German shepherd's presence was more than just a physical companion. It was a quiet, reassuring force, as if the dog understood the importance of this moment. The dog had no fear, no hesitation. It moved with a silent confidence, its every step steady, as if it was guiding them to safety. There was no doubt in Daniel's mind this dog wasn't just following orders, it was protecting this girl. The dog's eyes would occasionally flick up to meet his gaze, as if silently urging him to hurry. And with each glance, Daniel felt an unspoken bond between them, a shared sense of responsibility. The dog's protective nature was clear. Its body language was focused, its ears pricked forward, and its tail rigid with attention. The German Shepherd would occasionally give a soft whine as if signaling Daniel to move faster, to not stop until the girl was safe. It was clear that this wasn't just an animal guiding them. It was a guardian, a silent partner in this race against time. As the park came to an end and the edge of the town grew closer, Daniel could see the lights of the medical outpost in the distance. His breath came in quick bursts, his heart racing with both fear and hope. The girl in his arms was growing colder, and every moment felt more critical. But the German Shepherd was there, its steady presence a constant reminder that he wasn't alone in this. Daniel's mind was focused entirely on the path ahead. He could already feel the weight of the task that lay before him, getting the girl to safety, making sure she survived the night. He needed help. He needed warmth. And above all, he needed time. Time to keep her alive, time to protect her, and time to figure out who had done this to her. The snow had only intensified as Daniel pressed forward, his boots sinking deeper into the heavy drifts. His steps were quick but careful, each stride pushing him farther toward the light of the medical outpost in the distance. The wind howled relentlessly, stinging his face and making his breath feel like ice in his lungs. Despite the harsh weather, he never slowed. Every second counted. His arms ached from holding the girl, but he couldn't bring himself to stop. She was so light, yet so fragile in his arms, a tiny weight he feared might slip away at any moment. Her chest barely rose and fell as her body fought to survive, each breath a struggle. Daniel kept whispering encouragement to her, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "Hold on just a little longer, we're almost there." He muttered his words, swallowed by the storm, but it was the only thing he could do to keep his own resolve steady. The German Shepherd stayed right by his side, trotting along effortlessly despite the snowstorm that seemed to grow fiercer by the minute. The dog's posture remained unwavering, tail straight, ears alert, eyes fixed on the girl, as if ensuring she would make it through the storm. Daniel couldn't help but marvel at the animal's loyalty. It wasn't just a dog following along, it was something much more, a guardian, a protector. Every now and then the dog would glance up at him, and the look in its eyes was unmistakable. It wanted him to hurry to get the girl to safety before it was too late. Daniel's hands were frozen from holding the girl so tightly, but he didn't stop to readjust his grip. The cold seeped through his coat, numbing his body, but his focus remained on the girl, on the light that grew brighter with every step. The path toward the medical outpost seemed endless, and yet he kept pushing forward, the weight of the task ahead growing heavier with each passing moment. The storm had already claimed so much, and he couldn't afford to lose her. Not now. As the lights of the outpost flickered into view, Daniel felt a surge of relief mixed with exhaustion. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep going, but he couldn't stop. Not now. The German Shepherd's steady presence was the only thing that kept him moving. The dog's constant vigilance, its quiet support, was like a lifeline in the howling storm. His chest tightened with a sense of urgency, and Daniel quickened his pace, the outpost now within reach. The door to safety, to warmth, to help was just ahead. But just as he thought they were nearly there, the faintest movement from the girl in his arms caught his attention. Her lips parted slightly, and her breath became even more shallow. He moved faster, the snow whipping around him as he sprinted the last few yards. The dog stayed by his side, never faltering, never straying from its mission. The medical outpost was within arm's reach now, its warm light beckoning Daniel like a beacon in the blizzard. The wind howled relentlessly, but the sight of safety urged him forward. His breath was ragged, his body shaking with exhaustion, yet he refused to slow down. The girl in his arms, so small and fragile, felt impossibly light, her tiny body barely moving, each breath a fight against the cold. He could feel her life slipping away with each passing second, and the urgency to reach safety weighed on him like a ton of bricks. The German Shepherd, unwavering and steady, trotted beside him. Its amber eyes locked on the girl, its ears pinned forward with determination. The dog's presence was more than comforting. It was a reminder that Daniel was not alone. The dog's quiet vigilance kept him moving, the rhythmic patter of its paws a steady cadence that matched his own racing heartbeat. The bond between them was unspoken but understood. Together they were on a mission, and neither would falter until the task was complete. Just as Daniel reached for the door, the girl's breath caught in her throat. Her lips parted ever so slightly, and Daniel's heart skipped a beat. She had been so still, so lifeless in his arms, but now there was something different. The faintest movement, a soft breath escaping her lips, sent a shiver of hope through him. He moved faster, the snow stinging his face, his body screaming for rest, but he pressed on. As he pushed the door open, he nearly stumbled into the warm interior of the outpost, the light flooding over them like a sanctuary. He gently laid her down on the closest table, his hands trembling as he tried to assess her condition. Her skin was still cold, but there was something in the way her breath caught, something in the way her fingers twitched. That told him she was not gone yet. It was then, as he stood over her feeling the weight of her fragility, that a small voice broke through the storm. The girl's lips trembled, barely forming words. Chucho humfai kutoi, naku metoi. The words were faint, barely audible above the noise of the storm, but they hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. His heart stopped for a moment. What did she mean? What had she said? It wasn't me the dog saved. It saved my mother. His thoughts were a whirlwind as he stood there trying to process her words. The girl, weak as she was, had spoken with a quiet certainty. But why? Why would the dog be connected to her mother? Was her mother still alive? Had the dog been watching over her for a reason? The questions swirled in Daniel's mind, each one more urgent than the last. As the nurse quickly stepped in, moving to assess the girl's condition, Daniel's mind drifted. He couldn't shake the image of the girl abandoned in the snow, clinging to life. He looked down at her, her small form curled under the warmth of the blankets, her face still pale but showing signs of life. Her words echoed in his mind. The connection between the dog and her mother. He hadn't even thought about it before. He had been so focused on saving the girl, but now everything felt more complicated. Who was the girl's mother? Why was she in the park? And why had the dog been the one to find her? The German Shepherd remained at the door, sitting watchfully by the girl's side, its amber eyes never leaving her. It had not abandoned her. The bond between the dog and the girl was undeniable. Daniel felt a sense of urgency settle in his chest. He needed to figure out the truth. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but there were still so many questions. The warmth of the medical outpost enveloped Daniel as the nurse worked swiftly to tend to the little girl. Her delicate form lay beneath the thick, soft blankets, the faint rise and fall of her chest, a small but vital sign that she was not beyond saving. The nurse's practiced hands moved quickly, checking the girl's temperature, adjusting the blankets, and ensuring she was as comfortable as possible given her condition. Daniel stood just outside the small examination area, leaning against the doorframe, watching intently. He couldn't bring himself to move from the spot. His eyes never left the girl, her face still pale but showing signs of life. The warmth of the room seemed to bring a little color back to her cheeks, but it wasn't enough to erase the shock of finding her in the snow. Her small hands, still red and raw from frostbite, were tucked under the blankets, and Daniel's heart clenched at the sight. The German Shepherd, ever watchful, sat by the girl's side, its amber eyes locked on her with a fierce protectiveness. It didn't move its body still, but attentive, every muscle poised and ready to spring into action should it be needed. The dog's presence felt like a shield around the girl, as though nothing could harm her while it stood guard. Daniel admired the animal's loyalty, but he also couldn't help but wonder how deep the connection between the girl and the dog truly was. He glanced at the dog, then back to the girl. The bond between them was undeniable. There was something more than simple instinct at play here. The dog had found her, had dragged her to safety in the midst of the storm. It had been the one to lead him, guiding him through the snow. But why? What was this dog's story with the girl? And why had it been so determined to protect her? Daniel couldn't shake the questions. They clung to his mind like the cold that still bit at his skin. Why had the girl been left in the park alone? and abandoned in such extreme conditions, and why had she said that the dog wasn't saving her, but her mother? Her words still echoed in his ears like a riddle he couldn't solve. The dog let out a low, almost imperceptible whine, its gaze unwavering as it watched the girl. Daniel took a step closer, silently observing the German shepherd. There was something deeply comforting in the dog's steadfast presence. It was as though the dog understood the importance of this moment, the gravity of what had happened and what was yet to come. A heavy sigh escaped Daniel's lips. He had done his job, gotten the girl to safety, but now the real work began. He needed answers. The girl's story was far from over, and something told him this was only the beginning. The quiet hum of the medical outpost seemed to fade away as Daniel's fingers brushed against the crumpled piece of paper he had found in the girl's pocket. His hands were cold stiff from the snow, but as he unfolded the letter, he could feel the weight of something far heavier than the paper itself. The ink on the letter was smeared. The handwriting rushed, but the words were unmistakable. "Keep her safe, I will return." The simple sentence sent a chill through Daniel's body, a sense of urgency flooding his mind. Who had written this letter? The girl's mother. It seemed likely given the urgency of the message, but why had she left it with her daughter? Why had she entrusted this responsibility to the girl in such a way? The words were clearly written in desperation, yet there was a sense of hopefulness hidden in the plea, a promise of return. But could it be trusted? Daniel stood there staring at the letter, his mind racing. The more he read the message, the more questions piled up. Who had taken the girl to the park? Why had she been left alone in the snow? And most importantly, where was the mother? The letter suggested that the mother wasn't just gone. She had planned to come back, but the circumstances surrounding the disappearance were becoming more and more mysterious. His gaze shifted to the German shepherd still sitting quietly by the girl's side. The dog seemed to be aware of the growing tension in the air, its amber eyes watching Daniel intently. It hadn't moved since they arrived, as if waiting for something or someone. There was no doubt in Daniel's mind that the dog had played a crucial role in this girl's survival. But now the question remained. What role had the dog played in the disappearance of the mother? How much did it know? And what was it protecting? The more Daniel thought about it, the more he felt the weight of his responsibility. The girl needed answers, and the only way to find them was to dig deeper. The letter was just the beginning, a clue to a bigger puzzle. And Daniel knew he couldn't stop now. He had to find the truth. His fingers clenched around the letter as he slipped it back into the girl's pocket. She was still unconscious, her small body barely moving, but there was a glimmer of hope. She was alive. And as long as she was alive, there was still time to uncover the truth. The cold wind hit Daniel as soon as he stepped back into the park. The storm had not relented. The snow continued to fall in thick, swirling sheets, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. His boots crunched against the snow, each step sounding louder than the last in the heavy silence. The park was still deserted, the swings swaying in the distance, the benches buried under drifts. It was as though time had frozen, and the only trace of life here was the snow and the whispers of the wind. Daniel's mind was racing as he retraced his steps from the night before the path he had taken when the German shepherd had first appeared with the box. His eyes scanned the area carefully, the scene looking much the same as it had in the storm's aftermath. But now with the girl safe and the immediate danger over, Daniel's focus was sharpened. Something felt off. There had to be more to this than just the girl's abandonment. He moved slowly through the snow, the German shepherd by his side, its amber eyes still watching him with quiet intensity. The dog moved with him as though it knew exactly where to go, guiding him through the park like a silent partner. Daniel followed its lead, his boots crunching over the soft, fresh snow, his breath misting in front of him. As he approached the spot where he had first found the girl, Daniel paused. There, half buried in the snow, was the outline of something. His heart skipped a beat as he knelt down, brushing the snow away. The snow had settled on the ground in uneven patches, as if something or someone had been there long enough to disturb the surface. And then he saw it. faint tracks in the snow deeper than the light impressions around them. The ground had been disturbed, evidence of a struggle. Footprints heavy and erratic, leading toward a nearby tree. It was as if someone had been dragged or pushed along the ground, leaving a clear trail behind them. Daniel's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a random occurrence. Someone had been here. And the girl's abandonment was part of something larger. He followed the tracks carefully, his mind processing the new information. The footprints were large, heavier than a child's, and seemed to circle back and forth as though a confrontation had taken place. At the base of the tree, Daniel's eyes caught something more chilling. Dark, frozen patches in the snow. Spots where blood had once been, now thick and dried in the cold. The blood was small, but it was there. The scene was unsettling, a stark contrast to the otherwise pristine park. Daniel crouched down, his gloved hand brushing over the blood-stained snow. He felt a coldness seep through him, not just from the weather, but from the realization that this was no ordinary case. Someone had been injured, and this park, once a place of peace, was now marked by violence. His mind spun with questions. Who had been here? Who had left the girl? And who had fought to protect her? Was her mother involved in this? Or was there someone else pulling the strings? And why had the dog been there so insistent on leading him to her? The German shepherd's role was becoming clearer, but the bigger picture still eluded him. The dog barked softly, almost as though it was urging him to continue. Daniel stood, his determination renewed. This was no random act. There were forces at play here, and he had to uncover the truth. Daniel stood over the blood-stained snow, his thoughts racing faster than he could process them. The footprints, the blood, and the eerie silence of the park painted a disturbing picture. He had a feeling now, something he hadn't considered before, that the girl's mother might still be alive. The thought hit him like a cold wave, washing away any lingering doubts. The letter the girl had spoken, of the cryptic message about the dog saving her mother, now seemed to take on new significance. The more Daniel thought about it, the more convinced he became that her mother wasn't just missing. She might be part of something bigger. And if that was true, then the stakes were much higher than he initially realized. He glanced down at the German shepherd, whose amber eyes never left him, its gaze steady and intense. The dog had been leading him to something, guiding him with purpose. It wasn't just following its instincts, it was connected to the girl's mother in some way. But how? And what role had it played in all of this? The dog's behavior was almost human in its protectiveness, as though it understood more than any animal should. Daniel had no doubt that the dog was part of the girl's life in a way he couldn't yet fully understand. The dog had been her guardian, her protector. But from what? From whom? As Daniel looked around the park, his mind was filled with images of the girl alone in the snow, abandoned to die. But why? Who had done this? He could feel the weight of the questions bearing down on him, but he pushed them aside. For now, there was one thing he was certain of: the girl's mother had to be found, and finding her was the key to solving this entire mystery. The German shepherd let out a soft bark, almost as if urging Daniel to keep moving. He nodded at the dog, a silent agreement passing between them. They were in this together, and together they would find the answers. Daniel turned, following the dog's lead as it moved through the snow. Its nose pressed to the ground, it sniffed around the area, its body language tense and focused. The dog seemed to know exactly where to go, its instincts guiding it like a compass. With each step, Daniel's sense of urgency grew. There were pieces of this puzzle he hadn't yet seen, and he wasn't sure how much time he had left to put them all together. But the dog was leading him somewhere, and he was determined to follow. Daniel's thoughts were a whirlwind as he followed the German shepherd through the streets of the town. The dog moved with purpose, its body language firm and determined, as though it knew exactly where it was heading. Daniel's mind, however, was preoccupied with the growing pile of questions and suspicions that had begun to form around the girl and her mother. The blood in the snow, the mysterious letter, and now the unshakable feeling that there was something much bigger at play than he had initially thought. He spent the next few days quietly investigating, gathering information from every source he could find. He reached out to old contacts in law enforcement, hoping for any clue that might shed light on the situation. But what he uncovered was both disturbing and puzzling. A criminal organization was operating in the shadows of the city, a network involved in various illegal activities from human trafficking to drug smuggling. The organization's reach seemed to extend far and wide, and the more Daniel dug, the more he found disturbing links between this group and a series of disappearances that had gone largely unnoticed by the public. As he pieced together the information, it became clear several women had gone missing in the city over the past year. Each of them had vanished under mysterious circumstances, and the authorities hadn't been able to make any significant progress in solving the cases. But something in the records stood out to Daniel. These women, though they came from different walks of life, all seemed to share a connection. They were mostly single mothers, often struggling financially, living on the fringes of society. Daniel couldn't help but wonder if they had been targeted by the organization. But why? What was their connection to the larger picture? One name kept cropping up in his investigation: Margaret Hale. A woman in her early 30s, a single mother with 2 children, had disappeared nearly 2 months ago. Daniel's gut told him that her disappearance was tied to something bigger. He'd heard whispers that she had been planning to testify against a local shipping company which had been involved in smuggling and money laundering. Margaret had been part of a larger investigation, and her disappearance seemed to coincide with the sudden silence of the case. It was almost as if someone had wanted to shut her up before she could speak out. And then the realization hit him. The girl. Her mother. Margaret Hale's name kept resurfacing in his investigation. Could this woman be the girl's mother? Had she somehow gotten caught up in this criminal organization, and had that been the reason she was in danger? Daniel's mind raced as the pieces started to fall into place. If Margaret Hale was the girl's mother, the letter had been written in a last attempt to save her daughter. But it didn't make sense. Why would the organization let her live only to let her daughter survive too? His heart pounded as he realized the depth of the situation. This wasn't just about a missing child anymore. It was about a larger web of crime, corruption, and secrecy. And now he had to find a way to unravel it before more lives were lost. Daniel sat in his car, the weight of the files and information he had gathered pressing heavily on his mind. The storm had subsided, but the questions swirling in his head felt more intense than ever. The letter. The blood in the snow. The girl. And now Margaret Hale's name. Her disappearance tied to something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. His mind returned to the letter the girl had spoken of. Keep her safe, I will return. Those words echoed in Daniel's mind like an unshakable mantra. Her mother Margaret had clearly known what was at stake. She had known the danger was coming, and yet she had chosen to leave her daughter with the hope that someone would find her. But why? Why had Margaret sent her daughter into such danger? Daniel's thoughts flicked back to the park. The bloody snow, the signs of a struggle, and the sudden appearance of the German shepherd. The dog had been there protecting the girl, guiding him to safety. But what had the dog witnessed? What had it been a part of? It wasn't just an animal in the right place at the right time. The dog seemed to know more, almost as if it had been waiting for someone to act. He pushed the thoughts aside and focused on the growing web of connections he was starting to uncover. Margaret Hale, the missing women, the organization. He was beginning to see the patterns, and they were dark, dangerous patterns. Women disappearing, their lives slipping quietly into the shadows. And then there was the connection between the criminal organization and the shipping company. Smuggling, money laundering, human trafficking. The deeper Daniel dug, the more he realized that this was not just one isolated case. It was a much larger problem. The organization that had been operating under the radar was far more insidious than he'd originally thought. They had connections everywhere, pulling the strings behind the scenes, covering their tracks with ease. The missing women, including Margaret, were part of a larger operation. A system that exploited those at their most vulnerable. But why? What was their endgame? And where did the girl fit into all of this? The question of her mother's involvement gnawed at him. Had Margaret been trying to protect her daughter from something far worse than anyone could imagine? Had she been trying to warn them, or was she part of the conspiracy? There were too many unknowns, too many pieces that didn't fit yet. But one thing was certain: Margaret Hale's disappearance was no accident, and the girl, no matter how fragile, held the key to unraveling it all. Daniel rubbed his eyes, fatigue beginning to settle in. There were still so many questions left unanswered, and he had a sense that the answers were just out of reach, like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. But he had to keep going. For the girl, for the truth, and for whatever was lurking in the shadows waiting to emerge. The days that followed the girl's arrival at the medical outpost were a blur of medical procedures and unanswered questions. Daniel had stayed close, never once leaving the girl's side. The medical team worked tirelessly to stabilize her, but Daniel's thoughts were far from the hospital. His mind was tangled in the mystery of her mother, the criminal organization, and the connection between the girl and the German shepherd that had saved her. The dog never strayed far from the girl. Even in the sterile white of the medical outpost, where the harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the German shepherd remained steadfast. It lay at the foot of the girl's bed, its amber eyes never leaving her fragile form. The dog's posture was relaxed, but its gaze was sharp, alert to anything that might disturb the girl's recovery. Daniel had watched the dog closely, noticing how it behaved around the girl. The bond between them was undeniable. The dog would nuzzle the girl's hand when she stirred, offering comfort in the only way it knew. There was an unmistakable tenderness in the dog's actions, an awareness of its responsibility to protect her. It was as if the animal understood that its role wasn't just to save her life, but to guard her heart, to provide her with the safety and warmth that had been so cruelly ripped away. As Daniel observed the German shepherd, he couldn't help but reflect on the dog's unwavering loyalty. It had shown no fear, no hesitation when it had first dragged the girl through the snowstorm. The way it had kept her safe, its instincts guiding them through the blizzard, was nothing short of extraordinary. Daniel had been a part of countless high-pressure situations in his career, but he had never encountered an animal with such selfless devotion. In a world where betrayal and deceit often took center stage, the dog was a symbol of loyalty that Daniel had rarely seen in humans. Its protective nature was more than just instinct. It was a silent promise, an unspoken vow to keep the girl safe no matter what. The German shepherd had become more than just a pet or a companion. It had become a guardian, an unsung hero in the story that was still unfolding. Daniel's admiration for the dog grew every day. There was something deeply moving about the way the German shepherd had become intertwined with the girl's fate. It wasn't just following orders, it was doing what any true protector would do, safeguarding a vulnerable life with all its might, asking for nothing in return. As the girl slowly regained consciousness, Daniel knew that the bond between her and the dog was more than just a coincidence. The dog wasn't just part of her survival, it was part of her journey, her protection, and perhaps her salvation. The rain had started to fall again, soft and steady against the windows, as Daniel made his way to the small coffee shop on the corner of Main Street. The familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the warmth of the place, providing him a temporary escape from the constant pressure of the case. Daniel hadn't seen Michael in over a year, but the moment he stepped inside, he knew the place hadn't changed. The same worn leather chairs, the same chalkboard menu on the wall, and of course, Michael sitting at the back table waiting as if no time had passed at all. Michael was a former detective, someone Daniel had worked with closely on a handful of difficult cases. They had developed a deep mutual respect over the years, but Michael had since retired from the force. He had left the world of investigations behind, or so Daniel had thought. Daniel Michael said, his voice low but steady as he looked up with a slight grin. His salt and pepper hair was cut short, and his dark eyes still held that sharp, calculating gaze. "I heard you were back in town. You're looking a bit worn down." Long case, Daniel nodded, taking a seat across from him. "You could say that." "It's been a rough one, Mike." Michael raised an eyebrow, folding his arms across his chest. "I figured. So what's got you tangled up now?" Daniel leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper as he glanced around the room to make sure no one was listening. "It's a missing persons case. But it's bigger than that. A lot bigger." Daniel went on to explain the string of disappearances involving several women, how the cases seemed unrelated at first, but now appeared to be connected to something much darker. Michael listened carefully, his gaze focused and intent. When Daniel finished, Michael sat back in his chair, a pensive expression on his face. "I had a feeling something was going on in this town," Michael said, running a hand over his beard. "It's not just the missing women. There's a lot more beneath the surface. A few months ago, I started hearing rumors about a group operating under the radar, something big involving money laundering, smuggling, maybe even trafficking. You wouldn't believe how many people get swept up in these things." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "You think this is connected?" Michael nodded. "Could be. There's a web of shady businesses around here, shipping companies, small-time contractors, people who think they're untouchable. But someone's pulling the strings, and from what you're describing, I'm guessing it's all tied together." Daniel leaned forward, his hands clenched on the table. "Do you have anything concrete, anything that could help me track them down?" Michael paused, his eyes scanning the room once more before lowering his voice. "I've been tracking some unusual transactions through the shipping company. Payments coming in from overseas, unaccounted for shipments, things that don't add up. But it's all hidden behind layers of front businesses. I can get you the files I've been collecting. They're not much, but they might give you a lead." Daniel's mind raced. This was it. The break he needed. If Michael was right and there was a connection between the women and this criminal operation, then finding the leader of this group could unlock everything. "You're sure?" Daniel asked, urgency in his voice. Michael nodded. "I'll get the info to you, but you need to be careful. These people don't play by the rules. They won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to protect themselves." Daniel stood, his resolve strengthening. "I don't have a choice. This has gone too far." "Thank you, Mike." As Daniel left the coffee shop, his thoughts were already moving forward, processing the new information. He had a new lead, one that could take him deeper into the heart of the mystery. And with the German Shepherd by his side, guiding him like a silent protector, Daniel was ready for whatever came next. The evening air was crisp as Daniel made his way toward the old warehouse on the outskirts of town. The German Shepherd trotted beside him, its movements smooth and purposeful, as if it already knew what they were searching for. Daniel had barely gotten the new information from Michael before his instincts kicked in. This warehouse, one of many old industrial buildings, had been marked as suspicious in some of the files Michael had shared. It was an abandoned place on the edge of town, often overlooked, yet Daniel had a gut feeling this could be the next critical step in unraveling the mystery. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark and grimy, the once pristine walls now covered in layers of grime and rust. As Daniel approached the entrance, the German Shepherd stopped, its ears flicking forward in attention. The dog's nose twitched as it sniffed the air. Then it took a few cautious steps forward, leading the way. Daniel followed, his heart pounding as he realized just how close they were to uncovering something important. He trusted the dog's instincts now more than ever. The German Shepherd led him around the back of the building, stopping near a rusted door partially ajar. The dog sniffed the ground, its body low, its eyes alert. There were footprints in the dirt outside the door, fresh but not quite recent. Daniel crouched down, studying the ground. The prints were large, deep in places, as if the people who had passed through here had been carrying something heavy. Without a word, the dog nudged the door open further, signaling Daniel to go inside. His hand instinctively went to his gun holster, but he knew there was no need to rush. He needed to stay calm. The air inside the warehouse was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew and rust permeated the space. There was a faint sound of water dripping somewhere in the distance. The warehouse was mostly empty, with broken crates and piles of debris scattered across the floor. But as Daniel moved deeper into the warehouse, the dog's movements became more focused. It was clear the German Shepherd had led him here for a reason. The dog stopped in front of a stack of old boxes near the back wall and gave a low growl. Daniel moved closer, his eyes scanning the area. Then something caught his attention. A faint glimmer of metal was half hidden under a tarp. Daniel lifted the tarp, his heart skipping a beat when he saw what was underneath. A series of crates filled with contraband and wrapped items lay neatly stacked. Illegally smuggled goods, no doubt connected to the criminal organization. But something else caught his eyes. At the very back of the stack was a small, inconspicuous box. As he reached for it, Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The box was old but familiar. A piece of fabric stuck out from the corner, and when Daniel pulled it free, his stomach twisted. It was a piece of clothing, an oversized gray sweater, the same kind of sweater the girl had been wearing when he found her in the snow. His hands shook as he looked around the warehouse, now feeling the weight of the moment. He had found something significant, something tied directly to the girl's mother. This was no longer just about finding a missing child. This was about uncovering a criminal network that had torn families apart. The weight of the gray sweater in Daniel's hand felt heavier than anything he had held in a long time. He knew it was no coincidence that he had found it here, hidden among crates of illicit goods. This wasn't just about the girl anymore. It was about her mother, Margaret Hale, and the dark world she had been pulled into. The evidence was starting to mount, but now Daniel realized he needed to know more. He needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. He quickly surveyed the warehouse, his senses alert. The German Shepherd stood rigid beside him, its amber eyes focused on the area ahead. The dog's posture was stiff, and its growl was low. A warning, a reminder that they weren't alone. Daniel's instincts kicked in. This place felt too quiet, too still. Someone had to be here. He moved quickly to the side of the warehouse, sticking to the shadows. His footsteps were muffled by the thick layer of dust on the floor, but he knew time was running out. He crept toward the back, his eyes flicking to the German Shepherd. The dog was on high alert, its movements careful but deliberate. They had come here looking for answers, and the dog was determined to lead Daniel through every step of the investigation. The bond between them had only deepened, a silent understanding that they were in this together. At the far end of the warehouse, Daniel noticed a faint glimmer of light seeping through a crack in the wall. He motioned for the dog to stay, then moved closer to investigate. The crack opened into a small storage room, and through the sliver of light, Daniel could just make out the outline of what looked like a makeshift office. The faint sound of voices filtered through the door, low, hushed murmurs, but Daniel couldn't make out the words. He motioned for the German Shepherd to stay put and slowly crept forward, inching closer to the door. The dog's steady gaze never left him. As Daniel carefully peered around the edge of the door, he caught sight of several men sitting around a table covered in documents and maps. They were discussing something in hushed tones, something that Daniel knew would provide the answers he needed. He couldn't afford to wait. They were getting closer to the truth, but they needed to act fast. As he turned to move into the room, the German Shepherd stepped forward, growling louder now, more forcefully. The men inside the room immediately froze. Daniel's heart raced. He had no choice now. He had to move. He stepped into the room, his flashlight piercing the darkness as he squared off against the men. The German Shepherd followed closely behind, its posture protective, its growl steady. Daniel's voice was firm as he demanded answers. "You're involved in this, aren't you?" he said, his eyes narrowing. "Tell me where she is." One of the men shifted nervously, glancing at his companions. But the German Shepherd's presence seemed to make them hesitant. The dog's loyalty to Daniel was unwavering, and it was clear these men knew the dog wasn't just there to watch. Daniel stepped forward, pushing harder, but before he could get another word in, one of the men stood up quickly, attempting to make a move. Without hesitation, the German Shepherd lunged forward, knocking the man back, its teeth bared in warning. The room erupted into chaos as Daniel quickly regained control of the situation. The warehouse room was chaotic, the air thick with tension as the men backed away from the German Shepherd's growl. Daniel stood firm, his voice cutting through the unease. "I'm not leaving here until I have answers," he said, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of hesitation. The men exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsure of how to handle the situation. The German Shepherd, having already asserted its dominance with the one man it had knocked down, stood like a silent sentinel. Its eyes locked on each of them in turn. The dog was an undeniable force, its loyalty to Daniel unwavering, and its presence enough to make even the toughest criminals hesitate. Daniel stepped closer to the table, his flashlight sweeping over the papers scattered there. His hand shook with anticipation. Among the clutter of documents, one paper caught his eye. A photo, a family photograph the type a mother might keep of her children. It was worn at the edges, but it was unmistakable. The woman in the photo was none other than Margaret Hale, the mother of the girl he had found in the park. She was holding her daughter, the girl's face full of life and light. Daniel's chest tightened at the sight. He grabbed the photo and held it up for the men to see. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Tell me what happened to Margaret Hale." One of the men shifted uncomfortably, clearly trying to figure out his next move. She tried to run." One of them finally muttered, his voice shaky. "She knew too much. She wasn't just a mother. She was a problem. A witness." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. He'd suspected that the woman was involved in something larger, but to hear it confirmed. The notion that Margaret had been trying to protect her daughter and fight back against this criminal organization sent a surge of anger through him. Another man, still standing at the far end of the room, stepped forward, his expression full of resentment. "We tried to get rid of her. She fought us every step of the way, hid the girl from us. She wasn't going to let her go. She said that she'd come back for her, but we made sure she couldn't." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. The truth was brutal, and yet there it was. The mother had fought, had tried to protect her daughter with everything she had. But this criminal organization, these men, had done whatever it took to silence her. Daniel's gaze hardened. His duty was now clear. The girl, the mother. This was all part of something much bigger. The pieces were falling into place, and the truth was darker than he had imagined. He turned toward the German Shepherd, its amber eyes still locked on him with quiet understanding. The dog had been with the girl through everything. It had protected her, led him to the answers, and now it was clear that they had a new mission. Margaret Hale was not just a victim. She was a warrior, a mother who had fought against the system, against everything that tried to take her child away, and Daniel would make sure her fight wasn't in vain. The weight of the information hit Daniel like a sledgehammer. The criminal organization wasn't just a group of thugs. It was an entity that operated in the shadows, its hands reaching into every corner of the city, pulling strings and manipulating lives. And Margaret Hale. She wasn't just another victim caught in their web. She was someone who had dared to fight back, to resist their control, to protect her daughter at any cost. Her disappearance was no accident. It was a calculated move, a brutal attempt to silence her. Daniel's thoughts raced as he processed the full scope of what was at stake. He had uncovered only the tip of the iceberg, and the deeper he went, the darker the truth became. The missing women, the ones whose cases had gone cold, were not random victims. They were part of something far more sinister: human trafficking, smuggling, exploitation. And at the heart of it all, there was Margaret, whose only crime had been to try to protect her child from a fate far worse than death. As he stood in the dimly lit warehouse, the remnants of the encounter with the men still fresh in his mind, Daniel's resolve hardened. He couldn't stop now. He had uncovered too much to turn back. He owed it to Margaret, to the girl, and to all the other victims of this criminal network to keep pushing forward. The German Shepherd stood beside him, its eyes focused on Daniel with an intensity that spoke volumes. The dog had been a part of this from the very beginning, guiding him, protecting the girl. And now Daniel realized the dog was just as much a part of the fight as he was. They were in this together, partners in a mission that was far from over. Daniel turned toward the dog, his voice steady. "We're not done yet," he said, his gaze hardening with determination. "We're going to find her mother. We're going to end this." But the path ahead wouldn't be easy. The organization was powerful, dangerous, and well protected. Every move Daniel made would be met with resistance. The danger was real, and the stakes were higher than ever. The cost of the truth was steep, but Daniel was ready to pay it. His thoughts drifted back to the girl, the fragile child whose life had been spared because of Margaret's sacrifice. He couldn't let her mother's struggle be in vain. He had to find her, and he had to bring her home. Daniel's resolve was stronger than ever as he and the German Shepherd began their journey to rescue Margaret Hale. The air was heavy with tension, the uncertainty of what lay ahead pressing down on him like a weight. He knew the stakes were higher now, with the criminal organization operating in the shadows, determined to protect their secrets at any cost. And Margaret's life, her very survival, depended on his ability to break through their defenses. The dog was his constant companion, guiding him through the dark alleys and forgotten corners of the city. Its amber eyes never left Daniel, as if it understood the gravity of the situation. It had been through everything with him, leading him to the girl, providing protection, and now it was a silent partner in this high-stakes mission. Daniel couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude toward the animal for its unyielding loyalty and its ability to navigate the dangers that lay ahead. Their first move was to track down a few of the organization's safe houses, places where the group conducted their illicit activities. They needed to find Margaret, but getting to her wouldn't be easy. The criminal organization had eyes everywhere, and Daniel had to tread carefully. One wrong move, one slip-up, and it could cost them everything. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest as he moved with caution, the German Shepherd at his side. They made their way through abandoned buildings and shadowed streets, avoiding the eyes of anyone who might be watching. The city, which had once seemed like a familiar place, now felt like a maze, an unfamiliar, hostile environment, where every corner hid a potential threat. They reached a warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place Daniel suspected might be one of the organization's hubs. The building was dark, its windows barred and covered with grime. There was no sign of activity, but Daniel knew better than to assume it was empty. The dog's ears twitched, and its body was tense as it sniffed the air, alert to any sound or movement. Without hesitation, Daniel moved to the back of the warehouse, his flashlight cutting through the dark. He could feel the tension building as he neared the entrance. The door was old, the hinges rusted, but it creaked open with little effort. Inside, the musty air hung heavy, and the silence was deafening. The dog led him further into the warehouse, its movements deliberate and sure. As they rounded a corner, Daniel froze. There in the distance, he could hear voices, low murmured conversation, too quiet for him to make out clearly, but enough to send a chill down his spine. He motioned for the dog to stay close and moved forward, cautiously, every step calculated. He had to be careful. He couldn't afford to make a sound, not now. They were getting closer. The tension in the air was palpable as Daniel moved through the dark warehouse, his hand gripping the flashlight tightly, eyes scanning every shadow for signs of movement. The German Shepherd was right beside him, its body low to the ground, its every muscle coiled with readiness. The dog's nose twitched, its ears flicking with each new sound, each breath of air. They were close now, and Daniel could feel it in his gut. The time for quiet sneaking was nearly over. As they neared the source of the voices, Daniel's heart rate quickened. He'd come this far, but he knew the most dangerous part of the mission was still ahead. The voices were clearer now, the men speaking in low tones, too absorbed in their conversation to notice the approaching danger. Daniel motioned for the German Shepherd to stay close, and the dog, ever the loyal companion, followed without hesitation. He crept forward, his boots making no sound on the concrete floor until he finally saw them. The men were gathered around a table in the center of the room, their backs turned. A few crates were stacked nearby, and dim light from a single hanging bulb illuminated the area in eerie shadows. In the center of the group, tied to a chair, was Margaret Hale. Her face was bruised, her clothes torn, but there was no mistaking her. This was the woman who had fought to protect her daughter, and now she was paying the price. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He could see the defiance in her eyes, even in her weakened state. She wasn't broken. Not yet. The German Shepherd growled softly, a low rumble in its chest as it instinctively moved closer to Margaret, as if it knew the urgency of the situation. Daniel didn't hesitate any longer. His voice was firm, cutting through the air like a blade. "Freeze!" he shouted, stepping into the room, his flashlight sweeping across the men. The sound of his voice sent them scrambling, confusion flashing in their eyes as they reached for weapons. But the German Shepherd was faster. With a powerful lunge, the dog knocked one of the men off balance, its teeth bared in warning. The men stumbled back in shock, giving Daniel just enough time to move in. He pulled his gun and aimed it at the nearest man, his jaw set in determination. "Stay down," Daniel ordered, his voice a hard command. The men hesitated, their hands raised in surrender as they realized they were outmatched by Daniel and the German Shepherd. Margaret's eyes shifted to Daniel, and for the first time a flicker of hope crossed her battered face. She had been through so much, but in this moment, She was no longer alone. Daniel moved quickly to untie her, his hands working with urgency. The German shepherd stood by his side, its eyes constantly scanning the room, ensuring no more surprises. As Margaret stood on shaky legs, Daniel supported her, his arm around her waist. She leaned into him for a moment, her breath shaky but relieved. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse but filled with gratitude. The dog trotted ahead of them, guiding them out of the warehouse and toward safety. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Margaret allowed herself to trust again. The dog had found her daughter, and now it had brought her back to life. As Daniel and Margaret made their way out of the warehouse, the cold night air felt different, sharper, but not in a way that brought fear. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope, a flicker of warmth in the midst of the storm. Margaret's steps were unsteady at first, but with each moment the strength inside her seemed to return. She leaned on Daniel, but she wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a mother reunited with her daughter, and now she was free. The German shepherd led the way, its strong, steady presence guiding them towards safety. The dog had been the key in this journey, the silent protector that had fought alongside them, ensuring their success. It had never faltered, never hesitated. The bond between the animal Daniel and the girl's family was unbreakable now. The dog had found its place, not just as a protector, but as a family member, a guardian of something precious. Margaret's eyes lingered on the dog for a moment, and a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "You were right," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She brought me back." "Sure." Daniel nodded, his heart swelling with a sense of accomplishment. He had always known the importance of his job, but this was different. This wasn't just about solving a case or bringing someone to justice. It was about giving a family back what they had lost. It was about restoring trust, healing old wounds, and ensuring that the world was a little bit safer for people like Margaret and her daughter. The path ahead wasn't clear. There was still work to do. The criminal organization was far from defeated, and the fight for justice was ongoing. But for the first time, Daniel felt like they were winning. The darkness of the night had not won. The girl was safe, and her mother had been rescued. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel knew this was only the beginning. They would keep fighting, keep protecting the vulnerable, and keep searching for justice where it was most needed. As they walked together, the first rays of morning light began to peek through the dark clouds, casting a soft glow across the snow-covered streets. Daniel looked up at the sky, the weight of the past few days lifting slightly from his shoulders. The storm had passed, and the town felt quieter, more peaceful. There was still work to do, but now it felt like they were walking towards something brighter, something better. Margaret looked at her daughter, who was safe in the arms of the nurse waiting for them at the medical outpost. And as the German shepherd sat loyally by her side, Margaret knew that no matter what came next, she wasn't alone anymore. This story of a German shepherd's unwavering loyalty and the love between a mother and her child serves as a powerful reminder of the profound bond that exists between humans and animals. Throughout the journey, the dog has not just been a protector, but a silent hero, sacrificing its safety and guiding its human companions through the darkest moments. The German shepherd, with its remarkable intelligence and innate sense of duty, is more than just a pet. It is a symbol of the strength found in true loyalty and selflessness, in a world where we often hear stories of betrayal and deceit. The German shepherd reminds us of the purity of unconditional love. Its role in this story, leading Daniel to the girl and safeguarding her from harm, underscores a fundamental truth. Animals, especially dogs, are not just companions. They are guardians, offering us a sense of security, love, and protection that transcends words. The story shows us how animals have the power to touch our lives in ways we may not always understand, but that are invaluable and life-changing. Through the German shepherd's actions, we are reminded of the importance of protecting the vulnerable, showing compassion, and standing by those who need it the most. It's a story that echoes the deeper message that we all have the power to protect, serve, and care for one another. Whether it's a loyal dog or a dedicated human, the values of loyalty, protection, and love can change lives. And they are values worth striving for every day. Let this story be a testament to the profound impact that love, compassion, and dedication can have not just between humans, but across species.